Lab 22, Paper Chromatography and Colored Markers. Objectives: conduct a paper chromatography experiment with 3 different water-soluble colored markers. Design a successful method to ensure that chromatography paper remains vertical throughout the experiment. Observe the dye components of 3 different water-soluble markers. Your materials for this lab include chromatography paper, developing solution, graduated cylinder, hot plate, markers, paper clips, pencils, ruler, and scissors. I also found a bamboo skewer, a helpful addition. Introduction. There is a wide variety of marker products on the market today, ranging in color and function. All of these markers contain different dye components that are responsible for their color. Paper chromatography is an analytical technique that uses paper as a medium to separate the different dye components dissolved in a mixture. In this process, the mixture to be separated is placed on a piece of chromatography paper. A solvent is then allowed to soak up the paper. As the solvent travels across the paper, some of the components of the mixture are carried with it. Particles of the same component group together. The components that are most soluble and least attracted to the paper travel farther than others. A band of colors created at different components can be seen separated on the paper. The success of the chromatography hinges on slight difference in physical properties of the individual components. In this activity, you will use paper chromatography to determine the components of the dyes found in water-soluble markers. Your goal is to use paper chromatography to determine the dye component of 3 different water-soluble markers. You will also need to design a simple method that will keep the chromatography paper vertical while it is in the developing solution. Observe standard safety procedures in this lab. Procedure: copy the data table below in your lab notebook. Obtain a clean 250 milliliter beaker and a 7 by 2.5 centimeter piece of chromatography paper. Ours had slightly different dimensions. We actually ran 2 strips of chromatography paper for this experiment. Choose 3 different markers for this activity and label your data table appropriately. Because we ran 2 strips, we picked 6 colors. Using your ruler, mark 1 centimeter from the bottom of each piece of paper, draw a horizontal line, and then leave a mark for each of the 3 colored markers you're choosing to use, and label the colors. Now we're going to measure our 7 milliliters of developing solution in a 10 milliliter graduated cylinder. I think ours was a 25 actually. And then we're going to pour that into the bottom of the 250 milliliter beaker to make sure that just the bottom is covered. Next, we will need to design a method for keeping the chromatography paper upright in the beaker so that only the bottom of the paper touches the solution. So with the addition of a bamboo skewer and using the paper clips, with a little trial and error, I was able to establish a method which would hang the little strips of chromatography paper so the bottom just touched. And I used blank chromatography paper in a spare beaker to do this. So now we're ready to start our chromatography process. There's our paper one more time. So we're going to place our paper with the dots at the bottom into the liquid as shown. And now we wait. This part of the process took about 45 minutes, so I sped it up for you. When the liquid has advanced nearly to the top, we are going to go ahead and remove our chromatography paper, hold it up, get a really good look at it, and if we're careful, we can put it on a hot plate and dry it there. And then we can repeat the process with other types of markers if we choose. Notice the word carefully. That's kind of important in this case. Drying the chromatography paper on a hot plate carefully is important. So here, I'm going to remove the strips. I set it at about 50 degrees Celsius and place the strips on here so that they can dry. Here's where I wasn't too careful. Yeah, see, I left them on a little too long, and those two spots got a little scorched. But here I put them on a light pad so you could get a really good look. And after that, I actually taped them on the window and got a really nice picture that we could use for our analysis. So we want to go back to our data table, and I get creative when describing colors. So I've described the colors as I've seen, and I did use words like fuchsia, magenta, watermelon, cyan, indigo. You describe them in your words. Analysis. What was the purpose of the experiment? Why were only water-soluble markers used in this experiment? Could you use permanent markers? And why must the spotted dots remain above the level of the liquid in the beaker? And then for our conclusion, why shouldn't you use a ballpoint pen when making the initial line and spots on the chromatography paper? Make observations about the dye components of each marker you used. Explain how law enforcement officials could use chromatography paper to identify a pen that was used in a ransom note. List some applications for using paper chromatography and compare your results with others in lab. Use this data from this lab video to complete your lab report.
Right.